Yesterday, the president spent a chunk of his day venting on Twitter in his frustration about a New York Times story over the weekend, which revealed that Don McGahn, the White House counsel, has spent extensive time, hours and hours, working with the special counsel's office, providing information to them. The New York Times reporting that the president's own lawyers don't necessarily know what Don McGahn has told the special counsel's office. That raised the question of whether McGahn was in some way turning on the president. The president did not like that suggestion that was out there yesterday. Here's one of the tweets that he posted yesterday saying the failing New York Times wrote a story that made it seem like the White House counsel had turned on the president, when in fact it's just the opposite. The two fake reporters knew this. This is why the fake news media has become the enemy of the people. So bad for America. Meanwhile, the president's own personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, was on television yesterday explaining all of this, and he made a comment that attracted a lot of attention yesterday. Here's that exchange with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press yesterday.
And when you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. The President of the United States says, I didn't.
Truth isn't truth. Mr. Mayor, do you realize what...
No.
This is going to become a bad meme.
Don't do this to me.
Let's start with Venezuela. The banks there are closed today as the leadership tries another round of what they call economic reforms. Becky mentioned the massive devaluation. They're also going to introduce a new currency, which removes 5 zeros from the biggest bill as the country suffers from hyperinflation, which some economists say is now worse than it ever was in the Weimar Republic. The largest bill is a 100,000 Bolivar note. It's worth 3 U.S. cents. Cup of coffee is reported to cost 2 million bolivars, so they're going to change that. They're also going to raise the minimum wage by more than 1,000% and raise gasoline prices to international levels to combat smuggling. It's subsidized, so if you can get it to Colombia, you can sell it for a lot more. The Syria-like border crisis with its neighbors is worsening. Millions are trying to flee, what some are now calling the Somalia of Latin America.
The jury came to a conclusion and reached a verdict on 8 out of 18 counts. Here's what we know. Count 1 through 5, guilty. That is filing false taxes in a variety of years. Count 12, failing to register as report foreign bank and financial accounts. Count 12, guilty. Count 25, bank fraud, guilty. Count 27, bank fraud, guilty. They were unable to come to a consensus on 10 counts, and the judge says that he may consider filing for a mistrial on that particular 10-count situation. The judge is saying that Mr. Cohen is going to plead guilty on count 7. Which accuses Mr. Cohen of willfully causing an unlawful corporate contribution. That's according to the judge. Count 8 accuses Cohen of making an excessive campaign contribution. Mr. Cohen's plea bargain includes possible prison sentences of up to 5 years and 3 months, according to the judge. And the big headline, as you guys have been talking about, Mr. Cohen says, at the direction of, quote, candidate for federal office, end quote, he arranged to make payments, quote, for principal purpose of influencing the election. That is the bombshell headline. Michael Cohen making this plea deal this afternoon in federal court.
The president offering, as you guys have just pointed out, his first reaction this morning on Twitter, a relatively quiet morning from the president on Twitter, but then this tweet this morning. I guess you have to say this is tongue-in-cheek from the president. He's saying if anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen. Meanwhile, Michael Cohen's own attorney, Lanny Davis, was on the Today Show on NBC this morning. Savannah Guthrie engaged him in a conversation about a potential pardon from President Trump. Here's how that went.
Is he hoping for a pardon from President Trump?
Not only is he not hoping for, he would not accept a pardon. He considers a pardon from somebody who has acted so corruptly as president to be something he would never accept.
We have some news here that's just developing. This is according to Reuters citing sources. Saudi Aramco, the listing, the IPO that they've had has now been put on hold, and the oil giant Saudi Aramco has disbanded their advisors. This according to sources familiar. According to one source cited by the story, the decision to call off the IPO was taken some time ago, but no one can disclose this, so statements are generally going that way. First delay and then calling off. So a very big development here when and what could have been, Michelle, the biggest IPO in the history of capital markets has now been put on hold. Again, this is Reuters citing sources.
John. The president said to Fox News in an interview with Ainsley Earhart this morning that this could not have been an illegal campaign contribution because he paid the money. He put more than $60 million of his own money into the campaign. So how do you draw the line between, I mean, maybe this didn't flow through the campaign, but how do you draw the line between what was a campaign contribution and what might have been a payment to somebody for other purposes?
Look, I'm not going to get into the back and forth of the legal part of this. I would refer you to the president's outside counsel on that. As I told Cecilia, what I can tell you is what the president has stated a number of times. He did nothing wrong. There are no charges against him. Just because Michael Cohen has made a deal doesn't mean anything with regards to the president.
We'll start with Bitcoin news. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has rejected applications for 9 Bitcoin-based ETFs. The proposed funds were filed by ProShares, Granite Shares, Direxion. The SEC expressed concern about fraud and manipulation of the Bitcoin markets.
The Dow Jones is now reporting that David Pecker, the chairman of American Media, the company that publishes the National Enquirer, has been granted immunity by prosecutors who are investigating a series of payments between American Media, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump, and then 2 women at the center of all this, Karen McDougal, a former Playboy playmate, and Stormy Daniels, the porn star, in exchange for their silence in the lead up to the 2016 election. This is significant because Michael Cohen pled guilty earlier this week to counts relating to those payments. The prosecution's allegation here was that those payments were in effect a campaign contribution and were therefore illegal because they were designed to sway the outcome of that election in 2016. We've now just gotten a rare statement from Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Sessions here responding to President Trump's blistering criticism of him in an interview that aired this morning on Fox News. The president said that Sessions had simply never fully taken control of the Department of Justice, saying that Sessions never should have taken the job, and criticizing Sessions for recusing himself from the Russia investigation. Now Sessions issuing this statement in response, saying, "I took control of the Department of Justice the day I was sworn in, which is why we have had unprecedented success at effectuating the president's agenda." Sessions going on to say, "While I am Attorney General, the actions of the Department of Justice will not be improperly influenced by political considerations. I demand the highest standards, and where they are not met, I take action." The Attorney General goes on to praise the men and women of law enforcement and to say, "I'm proud to serve with them and proud of the work we have done in successfully advancing the rule of law." So a rare rebuke here from Jeff Sessions.
Alan Weisselberg, the longtime Trump Organization CFO, has been now granted immunity by the U.S. prosecutors in the Michael Cohen investigation. That's according to sources being quoted by Dow Jones. The prosecution, as you know, yesterday also granted immunity to American Media's CEO David Pecker, a longtime ally of the president. Mr. Weisselberg earlier this year was subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury in the Michael Cohen probe. He has now been granted immunity. He is the longtime Trump Organization CFO.
It's breaking news, and it's extremely sad news. Senator John McCain, the war hero from his service in Vietnam, who spent years as a POW, became a congressman, senator, and a candidate for president, the Republican nominee in 2008, has announced through his family in a statement that he has ceased treatments for his brain cancer.
Record day on Wall Street. NASDAQ, Russell, S&P, all-time highs. The Dow up nearly 170 points at the highs today, now up 134. That's a 0.5%. All 11 of the S&P 500 sectors are higher. Which is the highest? Materials, technology, and energy in third place, as you see right there.
The president just tweeting moments ago that he's asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo not to make a return trip to North Korea because the country hasn't made sufficient progress in denuclearizing, and also because China hasn't been helping enough. The trading relationship with China, he says, has deteriorated. That comes just a day after trade talks that were reopened between the U.S. and China closed with no breakthroughs, despite the two sides revisiting demands from several months ago.